Good morning. I had to chuckle when the chamber said, Ovell, we'd like you to speak, and then they gave me 20 minutes. I said, in Grand Rapids, my hometown, it takes me 20 minutes just to give shout outs, to say hello to everybody. So it feels great to be here. And thank you to Tasha. What a great level set for the group this morning. Let's give her a round of applause. I also want to say that I appreciate Tasha not reading the most recent LinkedIn post about me. I had breakfast with someone and they said, Ovell has a lot of wisdom and he brings decades of experience. I said, decades? Plural? Wow. So I'm going to get started. Tasha gave us a great level set. They could bring the presentation up. These are going to be repetitive in terms of we want to make sure that as you engage and participate in a session like this, you understand the language. We don't want to make any assumptions about the definition. So diversity includes everybody sitting in this room. And so raise your hand and say, diversity includes me. All right, and equity, we heard how problematic that can be for people who have privilege. There's a great visual that typically shows people being given a ladder in terms of the intervention they need to see a baseball game. So why diversity, equity, and inclusion matter? When I was at Corwell as the previous chief diversity officer, I got a number of community requests. Ovell, we'd like you to come in and talk to our organization. And I felt a level of resistance from some of those organizations, people sitting in the audience with their arms folded, looking at me, and my intent was to be helpful. And a lot of times you had the person in the back saying, I don't get it. Why should we do this? And my response was, you should give time and attention in deciding your why for putting forth the effort and the resources necessary to engage in this particular work. It's not someone's job to convince you that DE&I is necessary. It's your job as an organization to land on your why. When you take a look at this slide, you have three primary buckets: a business reason, the legal reasons, or the moral reasons. Find a why for your organization. When you talk about the bottom line impacts, the business reasons, a lot of things are contributing to the current state within the country post the pandemic, the great resignation, the war for talent that the definition continues. And you have a number of employees who want to work for organizations that have a social conscience. Most of the research shows that organizations that get DE&I and do it right achieve more profitability, higher returns on investment. If that's a reason you can subscribe to, then say that's the reason. On the legal side, all of us fall into a category that would be protected in terms of some of the compliance-related reasons associated with DE&I. Protections for gender, ethnicity, all of the obligations that go along with being a federal contractor, good faith efforts, affirmative action, all some of the legal reasons why it's important. Now, the moral reasons, where you attempt to engage and empower each employee, all this together equals excellence for your organization. I thought it would be appropriate for us to discuss the lessons that we learned from the pandemic. It is very interesting. I'm having a little hard time seeing this slide. But the top 10 lessons that we'll take away from the pandemic: a strong culture counteracts chaos. A lot of times people ask, how do you define culture? And a definition that I heard about culture that resonated with me is how work gets done within your organization. That particular definition speaks to the behaviors, the decision-making process, what gets reinforced. And so that is very important. And how are you establishing culture when you have people working from home, some in person, higher turnover that occurred during the pandemic, people exiting the workforce? How are you establishing culture? And as you see in the list, using 2 ears and a mouth, the importance of listening. the routine that we go about day to day where we may ask a person, how are you doing? And you don't take the time to listen to the answer. Inclusion is an essential takeaway from the pandemic, engaging the perspectives from your employees. The next slide shows you the demographics of Grand Rapids in terms of the ethnic and gender makeup of the city. You can use this to inform your work if you establish a goal within your organization to diversify your workforce. What's interesting is in the DE&I space, it's very important that you use data to inform your recommendations, but rest assured you're going to be challenged as you use data. I call it the data challenge, where you always have the person in the back saying, hey, excuse me, what was the source of that data, or are the numbers accurate? Well, back in the day, 2 + 2 always equaled 4. And you wonder the sentiment that is being expressed by all of the barriers that people put in front of you to continue the work and to be progressive. So watch out for the data challenger. In terms of what employees want, 78% of employees say it's important to work for an organization that prioritizes DE&I. 24% say that their organizations are currently not doing enough in terms of the DE&I space. And 80% of employees want their organizations to put more energy into the space of DE&I. In terms of workforce trends that we're seeing, connection to purpose, you got 5 generations present in the organization: traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials. The younger generations want to work for organizations that have a social conscience. And how do you define that? You have a lot of emphasis on sustainability and DE&I. And consumerism, the retail model has moved into corporate America, meaning people have many more choices in terms of the organizations that they decide to work for. And it truly is a decision. As we think about the expanded definition of geography with people having remote work opportunities, some of the organizations that I've been a part of, we've lost team members to out-of-state organizations where the employee doesn't even have to make a decision to move. We heard about the Great Resignation in terms of people deciding, am I doing what I want to do? And you see that play out. As Tasha mentioned, the hashtag quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is a very interesting phenomena in that we want employees to put forward discretionary effort, to go above and beyond in terms of their contributions, and that's not happening. People are deciding, I'm not going beyond 5 o'clock. I'm constantly connected to work, emails, texting, all of the devices, all of the many ways that you would be connected to work. People are saying, I'm not signing up for that any longer. Some of the other trends that we saw during the pandemic in terms of employer responses, we saw skyrocketing starting wages. We saw a lot of conversations regarding childcare with the numbers of women that exited the workforce. Daily pay. I work today, I should get paid today. We have all these dated models in terms of timing associated with paying team members. You may have team members that would desire a different frequency. Mental health, most of the HR forums that I've been involved in, that's the #1 topic, is talking about how well people are faring in terms of the stress levels, all of the challenges associated with the pandemic and the aftermath, remote work, the gig economy. I only want to engage with an employer in the manner that I feel works best for me. I may only want to work 12 and a half hours, or 8 or 4. I only want to go into the office once a week. How do you accommodate all those very different approaches? Flexible schedules. A number of employers said, you come to work for us, we guarantee your tuition, full tuition, instead of a more restrictive approach that only allowed so much per year. And then an increased focus on DE&I efforts. Bear with me, I'm trying not to drop these pages. In terms of the 2023 HR vision, the vision that we feel is most important in engaging, I can't decouple human resources from DE&I because I think as we think about our workforce, that is a partnership that makes for great outcomes. When we look at the 4 primary categories associated with a future-focused HR vision, one is people experience. As I mentioned earlier, consumerism allows for people to make choices. When you start talking about people experience, what does that mean? It starts all the way at the point that someone applies to your organization. Are you sending a stamped envelope saying, guess what, candidate, we got your application? That person is probably already working somewhere else. You know, what technology, what messaging are you sending them? Even at the point of telling the person, you may not be a fit for our organization. And every touch point within your organization makes a difference in today's environment. Engaging and including, very important. I was talking with a group yesterday about a lunch and learn that I went to in a similar forum where the presenter was talking about a miss that we all make in bringing team members into our organization. And when I read the background, I didn't get it. And so I went into the forum, you know, a little optimistic. He said, think about all of the time and attention you put in interviewing candidates and saying, guess what? You're joining Acme Inc. You're the person we want. And then you bring them into your organization, and guess what happens? You start telling them, this is where you'll park, and this is what you need to wear, and these are the hours, and these are all the things associated with our organization. It's a missed opportunity because we're on that 30, 60, 90-day checklist of here's all the things that the new hire is supposed to experience. Where are we gathering input or perspective from them? It's very interesting. I remember going to that and going, that's very interesting. So I always would volunteer as the leader delivering a welcome for new hires because I would always say, and guess what? We want to hear from you. Think about all of the reasons why we hired you. We want to hear your perspective. The day you start within an organization, you're part of the culture and contributing to the betterment of the organization. It's very important. Number 3 is one that always causes me pause, a reminder that you're talking about human beings and the importance of treating people like human beings. And I'll get to that a little later. And then individually focused, making sure that as you develop strategies that you have some flexibility to meet a person where they are. Now this slide I am going to read, El Sueño Americano. So how many of you participated in Art Prize this past fall? See a nice show of hands. I am a news junkie. I had aspirations when I left for college to become a news reporter, so there's not a day that goes by that I'm not tuning in. This particular segment caught my attention. This was a quote from one of the artists here, Tom Kiefer. The quote is, "The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Facility, where I took a job as a janitor in 2003, processed migrants and asylum seekers who had been apprehended while crossing the Sonoran Desert. Many of the personal belongings they carried were deemed potentially hazardous or non-essential. Rosaries, Bibles, a child's stuffed toy, family snapshots, medicines, letters, and personal identification were routinely confiscated and discarded. The seizure of these deeply personal belongings struck me as wrong." It was very interesting, and I think the common denominator for most of us as we hear things that impact children, a lot of us say, oh, that's not right. And so the task at hand is for us to decide your personal why in terms of using your voice for the betterment of our communities. And I'll get to that. As I think about systems thinking, the importance of systems thinking in this particular body of work, I've coined the 3 Ps: your policies, your procedures, and your practices, all contributing to systems which could lead to disparate outcomes. And that is where you need the data to inform recommendations from a systemic place, the recommendations that you make that should be bold and not cautious, because the data is telling the story. But these are the three areas for you to take a look at. Now, the next example is a great example of an organization here in Grand Rapids, STEM Greenhouse. Raise your hand if you're familiar with STEM Greenhouse. Good to hear. When I was at Spectrum, they approached us saying, hey, we provide math and science training to underserved populations. Would you be interested? Now, we didn't have an immediate return on investment, but when I heard that as the Grand Rapidian, the polar bear for all you Ottawa Hills folks out there, I hear you, Veronica. It's interesting. That was a no-brainer decision for us, because if we are committed, or we're committed to having a diverse workforce in the future, how are we going to have diverse team members or candidates to choose from, especially in healthcare, when the students were not achieving acceptable levels in math and science? And so it's been a great partnership, one that continues with Corewell today. And so everybody who has been in a presentation with me knows that there's going to be a table exercise. And because I know so many of you out there, you know that if you don't participate, I would be calling on you from the stage. But this is a table exercise designed to get you thinking about systems. So the exercise is 11-year-old Jason is in the 6th grade and is failing in most subjects. He is in need of basic clothing and appears to not be getting a full night's rest. If he misses the school bus, he generally does not come to school, as his single parent does not have transportation. So roughly 3-4 minutes, talk at your table about all of the variables affecting Jason, and as a table, discuss one systemic approach you would recommend to help Jason. Now, I've got a nice clock up here, so get started. Well, I only have two more. And I was like, oh, how's it going? Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good. 2-minute warning, 2-minute warning.
Check with Mike, let him know you have that one. Are you also helping with share out? How many people are we taking? But do you want to just Yep, I'll go to the other side of the room. Can you set this down over there? My phone is. Or I'll have my phone. We do not have a plan. Okay, that's fine. I'll follow.
Okay, let's wrap up. And I'm going to ask for volunteers before I voluntold. So let's wrap up. I'd like to hear from a table a report out in terms of your response to the exercise. And there is a mic circulating. Amari has that. Lisa, did you just raise your hand? Table 25. I told you guys you knew Sandra Gaddy. I saw her somewhere too.
So that was so funny because Amanda said, "You better drink that water because he knows us." So we talked about a couple of things. From a systemic issue, we talked about looking at why is there a lack of transportation if you're in a school district, depending on what that school district is, even if it is a public school, a private school, or even a charter school, are the voices of the community actually heard to talk about what barriers exist to being able to ensure that students can get to school and get to school on time. Also, was there any interventions in terms of counseling or teachers to have conversations to find out some of the basic needs that were needed when you talk about clothes and identifying some behaviors that might have brought up the fact that the child was not getting enough sleep. And then also, if you're talking about children failing most subjects, let's go to the root cause from the very beginning. Was there any support around early childhood education? Again, getting to the systemic issues. So we looked at it from your 3 Ps to see if there's opportunities to identify what variables are affecting Jason.
Thank you, Valisa, for volunteering. Let's hear from another table. Misty, was that your hand? She tried to look away like, okay. Oh.
I'm going to build on that because I think we touched on those issues and then our conversation went a little bit towards the community. Hearing from the talent community right now about some of the barriers to transportation being a huge issue. A lot of our manufacturing companies being outside of the city, but folks not living close to them. How are people then reflecting in the job? And we talked a little bit about single moms and how can we support that single mom both as employers and as a community? So we started with the how can we directly impact that individual, but it went to the larger system of talking about how we as a community need to tackle some of those larger issues. It was a great discussion.
No, thank you. Any other, looking for one more. Table 14.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Stand up.
That's voluntold for sure.
We had a similar approach with bringing in and engaging a counselor or a social worker and having that conversation as well as with the parents to make sure we're identifying any barriers and working to develop any solutions we can to break down those barriers.
Thank you. So trick question, how many tables made the assumption that the single parent was a mom? Did any tables decide that the single parent was a male? Silent thoughts. An element of bias. So the exercise was just designed to get you thinking about systems thinking. But other groups have raised that, immediately. Why are we saying that it's a mom? It could be a single dad. So just food for thought. So I have a couple more slides, and people have associated this mantra, and I had to make sure I understood the definition of mantra. Ovell, your mantra is stop the silence. And to give you backdrop of where that started, I was asked to participate in a discussion, and my question that was assigned to me was super easy. It was right up there with 2 + 2. And they said, Ovell, we want to know, what is the most significant challenge that you face in the DE&I space? And I was like, oh, I know the answer to that question. And the answer is silence. That is the answer. That's what happens when you start talking about DE&I. People start looking at their shoelaces, which is why I always wore better shoes, because I knew that people wouldn't be looking at me. People start looking down. I have a black friend, a Latino friend, a gay friend. It's not me, it's somebody else. Oh, I hope they don't call on me. It's very interesting how that silence is such a barrier in having conversations. And we have to think about, why is that? Because without the dialogue, there's not going to be any changes occurring. And I wrote use your voice because that was a hashtag that I developed in a session that I led about dealing with microaggressions in the workplace. And the card basically says, hashtag use your voice, and then a small abbreviated sentence saying, I will use my voice too, and then you fill in the blanks in terms of a way that you will decide that you will engage and use your voice in the future. Because me working in HR, I always get people requesting meetings, wanting to meet with me, and I don't really ask a lot of questions. I have an open door policy, and a lot of times people come in and they describe horrendous events, occurrences that have happened at work. And I'm sitting there, wanting to grab popcorn, but also wanting to say, did you say anything? And the numbers of times that people say no, it just continues to baffle me. So I want to encourage people to always find a way to use their voice, because we're not going to have any change. And in summary, before I get to the next slide, I was on my way to a DE&I event. I spent decades in human resources. I wasn't a DE&I effort. I called on Valisa because when I became the chief diversity officer, the whole team had flashcards. They're like, the D is for diversity, the E is for equity. Critical race theory means blah, 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 and BIPOC, et cetera. It was a continual learning experience, one that I appreciated. And I said, I feel like I can't shake DE&I. And they said, Ovell, embrace it. In that particular space, you have the opportunity to change lives. And I said, oh, I'm going to accept that and continue down that particular path. So a lot of people have asked me, Ovell, what's next for you in terms of, me departing Indiana? I was always saying, go blue every time I went into a meeting. They finally said, you need to meet with yourself on a Friday at 4 o'clock with a pink slip. Get out of here, Wolverine. Just kidding, just a joke. But I have established an LLC. I have a book coming out. That's a tweaked version of the cover. It will be available this summer, providing. Oh, thank you. I'm very excited about that, the book, because it highlights my journey as a diverse leader, making it to the C-suite, all the ups and downs, and then recommendations for organizations. And I have to say, as the non-boastful, humble person that I am, I just obtained an endorsement from the president of the SHRM organization, which was huge. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. So stay tuned on that. And then my website, which will go live, I believe, next week, very easy to remember, askovell.com. I'm going to be fielding HR questions that people ask me and providing answers. Are you guys ready for the tagline? Ready? The tagline of askovell.com is, you better ask somebody. So thank you, and good luck with the workshop today.